Welcome back to my channel. My name is Janine Rogan. I'm a financial educator and I teach women how to invest and build their wealth so that they can become financially independent and we can close the wealth gap together. Now, this week I wanted to chat about a poll I recently did with some of my followers on Instagram, and the topic is allowances. So my son is 4.5 years old and he has started to really take an interest in money, which isn't really that surprising considering what I do for a living. Anyways, I was starting to look into whether or not it was time to give him an allowance. He is very interested in buying candy from the store, which I think is very typical for any little kid. And so we emptied out his piggy bank that my husband and I had collected a number of coins in for him over the years and took him to the store to allow him to purchase whatever he actually wanted. And this got me thinking whether it was time to start giving him a weekly allowance. And then comes all the questions. Do you give that allowance on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? How much do you give your kid? And is it tied to chores?
Poor Cinderella.
So I turned to my audience and I polled you and asked what you were actually doing with your children. So the first question I asked was what age you actually started giving your kids an allowance. And there was a range, of course, anywhere from ages 5 to about age 10. And the average amount that people were giving their children, probably closely tied to their age, was between $2 and $10 per week. 41% of you said that you are tying your child's allowance to chores, and 36% of you said that you were not, leaving about 23% of you that somewhat tied them to chores and somewhat did not tie them to chores. So I'm assuming that means that some of the chores allow them to maybe earn more money, but they get like a base amount. Now, I grew up in a household where we got allowances on and off. They weren't necessarily tied to chores, but we could earn money for helping out and doing things that were kind of above and beyond. And my personal opinion is that there are certain chores that you need to do as a member of this household. So clearing your plate after dinner is one that our son is required to do at 4.5. He also loves helping out with laundry, so he does often help me out with that on the weekends. And when he's a little bit older, he's also going to be in charge of making his bed every single day. Now, the next question I asked was how you actually give your children that money. And I was actually surprised by this. I thought there would be more people that were digitally giving their children money, but over 50% of you said that you were giving your children cash. And I think that this is a really interesting piece and a really important lesson, because I think it can be really hard for children to actually understand money going in and money going out when we're using debit and credit cards, because at 5 years old, they can't really necessarily do math. About 32% of you were giving your kids digital money, so whether this is on a debit card or through an app, and the remainder of you were doing a combination. I think as your kids get older, you probably do end up shifting to more digital so that they can purchase things online. I was actually surprised by how many kids were actually using their allowance to purchase apps or purchase like expansion packs or things within a game that they're playing, because that is not something that I remember doing, but I think I'm probably showing my age at this point. I also asked you if you had any rules as to what these kids could spend their money on. Some of you said that you broke this up into savings, spending, and giving, which I think is an interesting way to do it. Other individuals said that you could only purchase 3 digital or app purchases in a row before you had to pick something else to buy, which I also think is probably a good rule. And many of you said no, which I think is a really interesting and probably healthy choice. I think, especially at a young age, it is really important for kids to learn how to waste money. And I think it is a really good lesson to learn when the stakes are really low. So my son, another example, well, he loves it, so maybe it's not a waste, but we were at swimming lessons and they have those little vending machines where you put the toonie in and you turn the crank and a little toy falls out, and he spent $2 on that, and I thought he would absolutely think it was a waste of his money and he would not be happy with his purchase, but that thing is in his room sleeping beside his bed every single night. So we also don't know what our kids value, and I do think it is important to let kids make mistakes so that they can learn. And I would much rather he learn on a $2 little fuzzy toy than a $1,000 purchase when he is 20 years old. And lastly, I wanted to know currently how much you're giving your kids for their allowance and what their ages are. And again, a range between 7 and 14, and giving those kids between $5 and $30 a week. Obviously, I think that this depends on age. My 4-year-old has no business earning $5 a week. I think that is over $200 in a year, and all of his needs and wants are pretty much covered by us. So this is kind of just honestly play money at this point. So he will not be getting $5 a week. But as he grows up and wants more things and has to actually save for some of those maybe Lego sets or games that he's interested in playing, I'm sure we will increase the amount he is going to receive every single week. A good rule of thumb that I think many of us use is however many years old they are is how many dollars they get per week. Again, I'm not sure my 4-year-old has any business earning $200 a year. So we're starting out, I actually went to the bank and got a pile of quarters, and we're starting out with 4 quarters every single week so that he actually feels like he is not just earning one of something, because I think the value of money is something that he is still learning, but that he is getting those 4 quarters and he's able to kind of do with that what he likes with some of the money that he already has in his piggy bank, which is like $40 over the course of like the 4 years he's been alive. We've just been putting our coins in his piggy bank, and yeah, he has like $40, which is an obscene amount of money for any 4-year-old. So I'm curious what you're doing with your kids. Please drop in the comments section how much you're giving your kids for allowance and if it's actually tied to them doing any chores. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week.